This webinar has been brought to you this evening by the Ayurvedic Professionals Association, and we are absolutely delighted to have Annie here with us, Anne McIntyre. So for those of you that don't know Annie, why don't you know her? That's what I'm going to say. She's got so many books. I knew Annie long before I knew Annie because I had her books. And she's really lovely and you need her books. So we are going to be posting in the chat box links to her. She's an Ayurvedic practitioner. She's a herbalist. She's everything. I mean, I could read out her bio, but it's like a who's who. She's aromatherapist, I think, homeopath. Annie, I think those of us that know you love you because you just really do walk your talk and you are brilliant. But I'd like to ask you, while everybody's coming in here before we start on the PowerPoint, how did you actually get into this? Does anybody ask you that?
All the time.
Okay, good. Because I don't know. I know you, and yet I don't know how you suddenly became this well-known person that we love.
Well, I was a young hippie.
Ah.
And I'd been...
Very young hippie, I think.
Yes, I'd been working for Virgin Records and saved up loads of money and was going to go traveling the world. I had been traveling the world quite a lot because I'd already done the overland to India thing. And then I came back, went to university to study Indian philosophy and religion and so on, and thought it was really dry and boring. So got a job for Virgin, saved up lots of money to go traveling. And then I started reading all these books about living close to the land and living self-sufficiently and getting back to nature. And I thought maybe I should just spend this money instead of going traveling and then having to come back, go and get another job that I don't want. Maybe I should spend it on a way of life. And at the same time, my mother, who was living in Suffolk, had an advert. She found an advert in the Times that said, house to let on island bird sanctuary off the coast of Essex. So she said, well, come home and for Easter and let's go and see the island. You had to get permission to go on. You had to wait for low tide, and there was a tide. When the tide went out, 2 hours before and 2 hours after low tide, there was a road that went across the seabed, and then you got onto the island. It was called Osey Island. And I went there and I just completely fell in love with it. And I said, this is where I want to live. So I lived there, got Richard Maybe's food for free, and just had the most a whale of a time, falling in love with nature, connecting to the plants there, going around with my book, trying to identify things. And originally, I thought I would just have them to eat. But then I realized the more I read about them, that they were the most amazing medicinal plants. And I used to just spend all day kind of lying on the ground, just being, spaced out and communing with nature. I was about 21 or 22 or something.
They'll forgive you then, yeah.
I think it's a very good idea. I think you should all commune with nature. Yeah. Even now. That's my retirement plan, if I ever get there. So after that, when I ran out of money, because of course you couldn't work on this island because the tide was different every day, I went to get a job for some people called Suffolk Herbs, and they grew herbs.
Yeah.
And there I met Julian, God, his name's escaped me. Anyway, a herbalist, somebody who was a herbalist or training to be a herbalist. And I heard about this course to study herbal medicine, and I thought, there's no way I want to do that. I just want to learn about herbs. But somehow, after my travels, I did go traveling in South America, and I was sitting on the top of a mountain on the Andes somewhere and just thought, that's what I want to do. I need to go back and I need to go and study. And then I kept studying, and I studied all these things and ended up with Ayurveda. And I think Ayurveda is the most amazing study. And I don't really want to be studying other things here and there. I don't want more homeopathy or aromatherapy or this, that, and the other. I need to deepen my wisdom into this amazing system of knowledge. And yeah.
Well, we're so lucky that you did do that. Because I had your floral healer for such a long while. And I remember looking at it and thinking, the person that's written this, they must really, really love plants. It's your little bits that you put about, this is the plant of forgiveness. And it's just everything, beautiful photos. And you could tell there was a really depth of understanding there.
Okay. Okay. So can everybody see the PowerPoint? I presume that you can, because I can't actually see you. So the amazing natural world, it is amazing, gives us incredible healing plants, which we could see as manifestations of the conscious intelligence of the universe. And they certainly have a wisdom, and they each have a wisdom of their own. So the life force, or sometimes it's called chi in Chinese medicine, or prana in Ayurveda, of each plant is a dynamic manifestation of consciousness. Each plant has its own different subtle intelligence or unique wisdom, its life force and its attributes, which give it its own distinctive energetic qualities. And it also has an array of medicinally active constituents, which I'm going to talk about. And from both perspectives, energetic and constituents, it gives us this amazing ability to heal. So the wisdom of these amazing plants we can actually benefit from, because there we are, we can interact with nature. I thought that picture was really beautiful, because that's just a sense of, you know, walking along that path and interacting with these amazing medicinal plants. They can help us to balance energetic disturbances that create imbalances and health problems in both mind and body. Reconnect us or realign us with consciousness, the consciousness that they are all part of, and in this way bring about healing. They are an extraordinary gift. If of thy mortal goods thou art bereft, and of thy meagre store 2 loaves alone to thee are left, sell 1, and with the dole buy hyacinths to feed thy soul. You could say, well, hyacinths aren't a local wild plant, but actually you get the gist. So every plant is different. Each plant has its own blend of all sorts of different attributes. It has all its different biochemical constituents, its physiological actions, and then from an Ayurvedic perspective, its qualities, its properties, its guna, it's either heating or cooling, drying or moistening, heavy or light, and so on. And then when you actually go and meet it, it has its own texture, its own appearance, its combination of tastes and smells. And if you spend enough time with the plants, with time and experience, it's possible to become acquainted with every individual herb, almost like it's a different person with its own character. And every single plant is different. You know, people have often said to me, so ashwagandha, you know, have we got a Western equivalent of ashwagandha? Is there a Western equivalent of, you know, Siberian ginseng? And no, every plant is different. It would be like saying, is there an English version of Donna? No, there isn't. Donna's Donna and I'm me. You know, we're everybody is different. And it's like that with plants. They're all, you have to just get to know them as a person, and then you'll never forget them. So since earliest times, when people lived much closer to nature than we do now, plants were believed to have natures and temperaments much like our own. So they had personalities. And as human life was suffused with the divine, so too was each plant, and they were envisaged as having a spirit or a soul, which determined their shape and their form and their smell and the way that they grew and their taste and so on, and determined their meaning and their purpose in the world in relation to our lives. And that's hedge mustard, which you may recognize. It tastes a bit like garlic, and it's delicious in salads. This is chicory. With this in mind, we can consider a healing plant as a whole and not assess its healing potential based solely on its active constituents or its different qualities. Every plant, this is plantain, these are the seeds of plantain, and every plant has got its own way of communicating to us what it does. And so that then we can actually use it and make the best use of its healing benefits. And before the days of microscopes and thin layer chromatography, we had only our senses to rely on. And this is what, of course, we use in Ayurveda. The plants are classified according to the way that we interact with them, you know, their taste, their smell, and so on, their energies, their qualities. The classification of plant medicines according to their effect on the senses was the foundation of the energetics of the ancient wisdom traditions of medicine. And even though we have microscopes and thin layer chromatography and so on, we can still use our senses. And I think it's really important to do both. Our senses can still serve us well, but we need to spend time with plants to develop a real sense of their healing potential. We have taste, smell, sight, and touch to interpret the messages from plants, maybe even hearing, as the wonders of the plant world may even speak to us in a subtle way. And of course, we have the mind. I remember teaching at Trill Farm a couple of years ago, and I teach the students there about really connecting with the plants through the 5 senses, or the 4 senses, not necessarily healing. And one day, one of the students came and said, "Annie, is it normal to hear the plants when they're speaking to you?" So I thought she was really lucky. There's a well-used scientific term called organoleptics now, which is actually the use of the senses so that we can see the shape, the color, the taste, and the smell of every plant. And in this way, evaluate the presence and the concentration and the quality of its constituents. So even that's a real mixture of sort of ancient and modern traditions. Most big herb companies today are using specialists in organoleptics as part of quality control so that they can be assured of their identity and their quality. And so this may go hand in hand with scientific analysis. The best way to learn about a herb is to become intimately acquainted with it. We need to know its natural habitat, its growing tendencies, its climatic likes and dislikes, the shape, the color, the taste, the smell, when to harvest it, and when are the times where it's most likely to be at its best, and then the constituents are most likely to be at their best as well. It's going to have more prana, more life, and so on. Most importantly, the herb needs to be experienced personally. And ideally, through contemplation and quiet time outside in nature, we can reconnect with our ancient skills to reawaken and develop our senses for better understanding of the healing properties of the plants around us. And actually, we can all do it. Even if you live in a high-rise building in the middle of London, you may think that you've lost your ancient skill of connecting with nature and really getting a sense of what plants do, but you haven't. I do a lot of teaching in the garden, and when I've had people coming into the garden and I say, go around and pick a plant and just spend time with it. Taste it, smell it, look at the way that it's growing, just get a sense of what it's about. And then write down what you think it could do for you on a physical level, an emotional level, a mental level, even a spiritual level. And I have to say that everybody is right. They all know. It doesn't matter if they've even just spent half an hour with a plant, they all know. It's amazing. The qualities experienced by our senses can give us a deep sense of knowing, but at the same time, they are to some extent subjective and perhaps not to be relied on totally. So they need to be combined with reason and experience. It's important to understand a plant through our left brain as well, its constituents, pharmacology, traditional uses, dosage range, appropriate method of administration, contraindications, as well as its potential and known drug, herb, or herb-drug interactions. That's flax, the little linseed flower. So the first plant that we're going to talk about is wild garlic, and I'm going to stop sharing so that we can just discuss it a little bit. So did anybody here manage to find wild garlic? Oh, you found a flower and leaves. So I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, so, right, that's wonderful. So you people who have got your leaves and flowers with you, would you like to take a bite? Rub it. Actually, if you sort of damage it, you bruise it with your fingers and rub it, then what happens? It's pretty strong, isn't it? So actually, if you got another leaf and you didn't bruise it, and then you smelt it, you can hardly smell anything, can you? So we know that actually for you to be able to smell the leaves, for you to actually release the constituents from the leaf, they need to be crushed. And something happens to the constituents in the plant when you crush it. Like garlic, ordinary culinary garlic, garlic cloves. You know, once you crush the garlic clove, you release its allicin, it's called. They're sulfur compounds, and they're sulfurous, so they can burn. And, you know, garlic is pretty hot, it burns. This could be considered to be milder, but actually we're going to see that in lots of ways, wild garlic is more potent than cultivated garlic. And why should we be surprised? Because actually a wild plant grows in the habitat that it wants to. Whereas, you know, if I plant garlic in my vegetable garden, I've put it somewhere that it doesn't necessarily choose to be. Wild garlic growing in woods is where it wants to be, and it's vibrant and it's doing its thing. And actually, in lots of ways, surprisingly, wild garlic is more potent than cultivated garlic. And we're going to see in the PowerPoint. But you Ayurvedic people, and maybe you want to put these things in the chat, or I'm really happy for you to speak. What is the taste of the garlic leaf? Or the flower, because some of you have got flowers. I didn't have flowers out, so you're a bit ahead of me. Pungent.
We've got pungent so far. Pungent twice, yeah. Pungent. Bitter. Bitter. Sweet. Pungent and bitter.
Okay. So when you, a tiny bit sour, yeah. When you experience it in your mouth, what does it do? What is the first thing that you what are the words that come to mind?
Mouth waters. Salivating, burns, sour, heat, salivating again. Are we hitting the mark, Annie?
Yep.
Stimulating the nose.
Yep. So what do you think this does for your digestion or for your agni, if we're going to be Ayurvedic?
It says becomes hotter, cleans. Someone's put cleans. Stimulates, warming, activating agni. Good for digestion.
Agni deepener, yeah, it stimulates. It's interesting, isn't it? That the taste of it is quite stimulating. It's definitely garlicky and it feels stimulating. But do you remember what in Ayurveda they say about garlic from a guna perspective? You know, the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Do you remember what they say about the cultivated garlic from a gunic?
Rajas, rajestic, rajas. Everybody's kind of putting it in there. Rajas.
Yes, but actually also they say that to start with, it has a rajasic effect. And then here we're coming, tamasic. Yeah. So to start with, it's rajasic and it's stimulating. So it stimulates digestive fire, it stimulates the circulation. It's kind of a stimulating taste, isn't it? And it feels rajasic, but afterwards it's tamasic, which is for two reasons. You know, if you want to be an ascetic or you want to lead a deeply spiritual life, it's not advised that you eat a lot of garlic. Because it's too rajasic, and then it's tamasic. Rajasic, for people who aren't in the Ayurvedic world, rajasic means it's very stimulating, sort of heating and fiery, and it's just going to make you feel it could make you feel a little bit overstimulated. We're all too stimulated anyway, so it could sort of overstimulate us, make us a bit irritable, angry, overcompetitive, whatever. Tamasic is the opposite. It's, you know, we need tamas to go to sleep at night, to relax, just to sort of let go. And tamas is sort of darkness as opposed to light, and sleep as opposed to activity, ignorance as opposed to wisdom. And so you could see why garlic isn't recommended. And also it has an affinity with the reproductive system. So it could be what in Ayurveda they call a Vajikarana, which means an aphrodisiac, which actually would be a good thing if you were having problems with fertility or you actually wanted more sexual energy. But then if you're trying to sit there and in your yoga posture, your lotus, and achieve moksha, maybe you don't want to be too stimulated by your sexual energies. So it depends what you want. Anything else from the taste or the smell?
But I thought it's actually from the onion family, not garlic. So that's the last one that's come in there.
They're the same family. They're alliums. This is allium ursinum, or ursinum. So it's the same family. Onion is Allium cepa, garlic is Allium sativum. This is Allium ursinum. They're very similar. They have similar properties. Anything else that you can glean from the taste or the smell or the look or how you feel wandering through a wood full of wild garlic?
Who got theirs from the wood? That was you, Faith. Refreshing, somebody's put. Fragrant
and energized. I get hungry.
Uplifting.
Heaven sent. Yeah, it's so beautiful. I mean, sense cleansing. It is an amazing cleansing herb. So it's interesting, you know, that we will receive that information through our senses. It is a really excitable. It is quite, you know, the smell of it wafts through the woods, doesn't it?
Proves there's Beltane romance.
Well, yes. I mean, would you want your romantic partner to smell of wild garlic? Well, it would be all right if you both ate it. Okay, so let's go back to see what she says in her PowerPoint. So it's also known, some people know it as ramsons or bear's garlic. And the species name ursinum comes from the Latin ursus, meaning bear. So according to folk tales, bears awakening from hibernation eat wild garlic to clear toxins from the body and to regain their strength. So it's cleansing and it's strengthening, according to bears. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, you can see it's in the lily family. Those are all the qualities: oily, heavy, sticky, etc. It's got all tastes except sour, although I could actually relate to a bit of sour as well. Post-digestive pungent, we got that, and heating, increases pitta, actually has an affinity with all 7 tissues, which is quite amazing. And then the shrotas, the digestive, the respiratory, the nervous, the reproductive, the blood circulation, and lymph. So it's you can see already that it's going to have a lot of different things to say. So amazingly, all parts of the plant are edible: the stems, the leaves, the seeds, the flowers, and the roots. Best to use, if you want to use the flowers rather than leaves, it's best they're at their best before the plant actually flowers. And the older it gets, it can taste slightly bitter. So some people were saying more bitter than pungent. I think maybe it was because the flowers the flowers had come out and the leaves were older. And I think the flowers are quite bitter. They're bitter and pungent. So in the constituents are interesting. So the precursors to the smell, so before the smell, the constituents are there before you crush the leaf, are sulfur-based compounds. And they are particularly abundant, and you'll see what the sulfur compounds do in a minute. They're particularly abundant in the leaves early, in March and April, before flowering. And also they focus in the bulbs as well, the roots, which you would then have to go and dig up in August and September. And they also contain vitamin C, A, and B, and all these different things: magnesium, iron, selenium, and so on. So volatile, that means, you know, things that are easily changeable. Secondary metabolites are released when the plant is damaged or bruised, which is why when you crush the plant, then you release these things that you can smell. and they're called thiosulfonates, and they evaporate easily and they waft through the air. And so when you walk on wild garlic, then you're going to get this smell much stronger than if you just walk along that path and you don't touch the plant. So when you actually press them, you bruise them, then you'll get them, these thiosulfonates, particularly allicin, which is also in cultivated garlic. So wild garlic is a good source of antioxidants, which is why it's classified as a racina. So it has phenols and flavonoids, particularly camphorol, and it also has lectins and fructans and fatty acids and so on. It's a particularly good source of adenosine, with only 20 times more adenosine than standard garlic. So what is adenosine? Adenosine calms the heart and the mind, reduces pain and blood pressure, and helps induce a restful sleep. There's the tamas, the good side of tamas. You know, tamas gets a bad press, I think. It is neuroprotective, promoting even heart rhythm and oxygen delivery, suppressing high brain arousal, and inducing sleep by suppressing serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and glutamate. And the flowers are really beautiful, aren't they? So wild garlic has got a lot of different vitamins and minerals, and it's known as the magnesium king of plants because of the high levels of magnesium, particularly in the leaves. And magnesium, of course, is known as the anti-stress mineral and has a protective effect on the heart and circulation. So all the different actions, which I won't go through all of them now, but the first one is antimicrobial, and then antifungal and active against staphylococcus infections, bacterial infections, fungal infections like candida. And that's where the sulfur compounds come in, because they are amazing antimicrobial constituents. And you can see that it's also anti-inflammatory. There's the digestive, bronchodilator, expectorant, vasodilatory, dilating the arteries and bringing down blood pressure, cardioprotective, anti-arthritic, immunostimulant, reducing cholesterol, anti-tumor, and reducing blood sugar. From an Ayurvedic perspective, this is a really wonderful, nourishing herb that reaches all 7 dhatus. It's a rasana, particularly for vata and for kapha, and we know that being a little bit heating, it might increase pitta. And it has a particular affinity for bone and nerve tissue. Raises the agni, as you got, improves digestion and absorption, clears ama from the gut, and we know that it helps to normalize the gut flora. Actually, interestingly, garlic is not only antimicrobial and kills off the unfriendly gut bacteria, but it's also a prebiotic and feeds the good bacteria. It's useful for disturbance of Cledica kapha in the stomach and apana vata in the lower abdomen. It helps regulate prana and udana vata in the head and the throat, and it's really good for breathing. It's a fantastic herb for chest infections, catarrh, congestion, and so on. Clears ama and kapha from the rakta, blood, rasa, plasma, and lymph, and meda dhatu, fat, by encouraging sweating, and it helps to lower cholesterol and reduce blood clotting. So interestingly, wild garlic was recognized as plant of the year, I know it was a long time ago, 1992, by the Association for the Protection and Research of European Medicinal Plants. It's a great remedy for the immune system and a really good herb for combating infections. And I was very sad that wild garlic wasn't all over the news in these COVID times, because I think it could be an amazing help to the immune system when we need it. So wild garlic may have several benefits over cultivated garlic. It has higher quantities of adenosine and adenosine, which help to lower blood pressure and reduce cholesterol. Several minerals are also found in higher amounts. Extracts from the leaves, the stems, and the flowers have been found through research to inhibit the proliferation of cancer cell lines, including breast, lung, prostate, colon, lymphomas, and neuroblasts. Wild garlic camphoryls act as a chemopreventative agents inhibiting the formation of cancer cells. Wild garlic has been seen to have greater potency in this respect than cultivated garlic. Clove garlic, cultivated garlic, is known for its antibacterial, antifungal, and antiviral properties because of the sulfur content. It was used in the First and Second World War, and I know people that actually said that they saved people from losing limbs by using garlic. But actually, wild garlic is even more potent, with 4.5 times more sulfur compounds than culinary garlic. Apparently 1 gram of wild garlic a day improves the circulation, dilates blood vessels and thins the blood, so it's a good cardiovascular tonic. And you can freeze it, the leaves actually and flowers, they all freeze quite well. But you've got, if you miss things in the spring, of course, you've got the bulbs in the autumn. It's a bit like hawthorn. If you miss the flowers and the leaves, you've got the berries in the autumn. The leaves make a tasty addition to salads, can be made into a fantastic pesto as an alternative to the normal pesto. You can put the leaves in everything. You can eat them like spinach. You can put them in your potato dishes, your egg dishes. I put them into frittata. They go well with practically everything. Don't leave them for too long in the fridge, because actually they're pretty nasty when they've been left too long. Cooking reduces the flavor of the leaves and the flowers, so they're best added towards the end of cooking. The bulbs are a bit like onions or spring onions, and you can add them to dishes. You can use them raw, you can use them instead of garlic or onions. And they're actually, you could pickle them. They're great pickled, actually. And that is the end of that. Any comments, any questions?
There was an interesting one in the chat box from Tamara. She says, on the Croatian island of Mali, I think it is, popular health tourism destination since the 19th century, local inhabitants have raised a monument to wild garlic for helping local population survive World War II.
Amazing. Fantastic.
Somebody's saying they thought it was illegal to pick wild garlic bulbs.
It's not a restricted plant.
Okay.
So no, I don't think so.
And
you can also grow it in your garden. If it grows where it wants to grow. If it doesn't like your soil, it won't grow. I mean, everybody collects wild garlic. I don't think it's not on the restricted list like cowslips and primroses are. You're not allowed to pick cowslips, but I'm pretty sure you can wild garlic.
Atma has said it's illegal in the Netherlands, so maybe somebody was thinking about Holland. But, yeah, and somebody else had asked how to use it, and then you put the slide up and said how to use it.
Okay. There's lots more information online. There's endless recipes online about how to use wild garlic and how to make wild garlic pesto and all sorts of things. I've made a tincture before now of the roots, but it is quite garlicky. So, you know, I don't think people are quite funny about garlic, aren't they? They think it's very antisocial. So it's not easy using wild garlic as a tincture. I think, you know, better to put it in a meal so that if you're all eating it, then nobody really smell the other person.
But like you said, in fermented vegetables, if it's a prebiotic as well, I mean, I do fermented vegetables, so I'm going to go and pick mine and put it into my next batch of fermented vegetables.
Yeah. I think you could freeze them at this time of year, but of course, if you want to get the bulbs to ferment, then you have to wait till the end of the summer. So let's move on to the next herb, because I don't want to run out of time. So the next thing, which I've got a lot to say about, is dandelion. So has anybody got either dandelion flowers or leaves with them? Okay, so using organoleptics, using your 5 senses, how does it look? How does it smell? And then how does it taste?
Okay, we've got smells bitter, bitter and salty, calm and soft, bitter and a little bit pungent, bitter and sweet, going fast, smells fresh, bitter and slightly pungent, bitter, bitter taste, bulb sweeter than leaves, bitter and sweet.
Okay. Has anybody had dandelion coffee, which is made from the root?
Yeah.
What does that taste of?
Yuck. I hate it. I was made to have it for a long while. I hate it. Somebody's put, I love it, super bitter and yum, sweet and bitter, so bitter. I think that's what I didn't like, was bitter.
I think so. Do you think that the leaf is more bitter than the root, or do you think the root is more bitter than the leaf?
Anybody? I think I can eat the leaves happily. I'm not so good with the root. Too bitter for me, the root.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I agree with Gail and Tamara. I think the leaf is more bitter because the leaf and the flower is pretty bitter as well, but the leaf is just bitters. I mean, it's got an awful lot of bitter substances in it, whereas the root has got starch, because all roots contain starch because they provide the starch for the plant to keep going through the winter. So starch is kind of sugar.
Yeah, sweet.
So it's sweet. So yeah, sweetness. So the taste generally of the leaf is sort of bitter, maybe slightly pungent, and the root is sweet and bitter. So if it's bitter, what, you people who know anything about herbs, or just from tasting it, what is the sense that you get from what the bitter taste is doing? Because this is quite different from the wild garlic. The wild garlic was definitely pungent and garlicky. This is quite different. Cleansing, refreshing.
Yeah, refreshing, astringent. I think it'd be quite penetrating. Anybody's got...
It's light. It's definitely light. The root is heavier with all those sugars.
Yeah. Quite dry in your mouth when you keep chewing it. Expansion, self cooling rather than warming.
Do you know the organ of the body that the bitter taste has a particular affinity with?
I do.
The liver.
The liver. Liver. Everybody's happy.
So this is a great liver herb. And actually it's friends with chicory. You know chicory with the beautiful blue flower? It's not out yet, but the leaves come up first and then the flower, it flowers sort of later on in the summer. Has anybody ever tasted chicory leaves? Super bitter, much more bitter than this. But these leaves, as the season goes on, will get more and more bitter. Yeah. And of course, chicory root is where we get, lots of people who take inulin as a prebiotic. Most of the inulin comes from chicory, but actually you could just as well get it from dandelion, because dandelion root's got masses of inulin. 45% of the root is inulin, actually. So it's a really good prebiotic. So I'm sorry you don't like the taste, Sue, but actually dandelion coffee is really good for your gut.
Odd. Would be.
All the yucky things. It's not that yucky. I mean, the thing is about dandelion root, when you actually get the fresh root, if you chewed it, if you washed it and chewed it, it would be pretty bitter. But then if you roast it, it's like roasting sweet potatoes and butternut squash. They all get a lot sweeter. So when you roast the dandelion, you can do it yourselves. You can chop up, dig up the leaves, chop it up in small pieces, roast it in the oven, and then it becomes sweeter and actually nice. Anyway, let's have a quick look. I'm conscious of time, and I've got lots more to show you. Okay. Okay, so dandelion. So the energies, light, dry, sharp and penetrating, bitter and sweet, but that's actually the root more than the leaf. And of course, slight cooling effect, reduces pitta and kapha, increases vata in excess, has an affinity with plasma, blood, fat, and bone tissue. And with the systems of the body, the digestive, circulatory, urinary, lymphatic, and with the breasts, has a great affinity with the breasts. These are the constituents, which I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail, but you'll see that the leaves, particularly of dandelion, are amazingly nutritious. They're full of minerals and vitamins, vitamin A, they're a really high source of vitamin A, actually, in folic acid, calcium, iron, potassium, zinc, manganese, etc. So adding them to your salads, or even, you know, in Greece, they make, they grow dandelions in their garden, or they grow sort of various different versions of dandelion. They call them horta. And instead of making spanakopita with spinach, they use dandelion leaves, which actually works very well. I mean, it's a bitter version, but it's quite nice. The roots contain polysaccharides, notably inulin, carotenoids, fatty acids, minerals, choline, vitamins, mucilage, and pectin. So mucilage means that they actually have a really soothing effect. And the pectin, again, is another prebiotic. So the actions, the root is a digestive, they're both digestives, bitter tonic. Hepatic means works on the liver. Aperient means it actually is a mild laxative. Ulcerative means blood cleansing. Cholagogue means it stimulates the liver and gallbladder. Antiarthritic. Galactagogue means it increases the production of breast milk. Antioxidant, anti-cancer, reduces cholesterol. The leaves are famous for that being a diuretic and sort of reducing weight and have an affinity with fat tissue. The flowers as well are medicinal. They're a really good source of antioxidants. People can make, you can make dandelion wine with the flowers, but actually, why not eat them? Put them in your salads. People forget about the flowers, I think. They have a rich content of phenolic compounds, which are antioxidants, including flavonoids, luteolin, coumaric acid, and vitamin C. So dandelion is a gently detoxifying bitter tonic, increases the elimination of toxins, wastes, and pollutants through the liver and the kidneys. So you've got the liver action of the bitterness and then the diuretic action, particularly of the leaves, and cleanses the blood. Particularly useful in the spring for spring cleaning after the heavy clogging food and sedentary habits of winter. So these are the Ayurvedic actions: clears toxins from the gut, good remedy as diuretic, but helps to break down stones and gravel. Even though it's bitter, it's got that little bit of pungency, so it does enkindle agni. Really good for treating the skin, regulates fat metabolism, good remedy for diabetes, purifies the blood, Rasana, it's rejuvenating, increases milk supply, mild laxative, and a liver remedy. They're one of the best vegetable sources of beta-carotene, which is, of course, a potent antioxidant. And we know that antioxidants are amazing for preventing all sorts of problems associated with the aging process: cardiovascular disease, diabetes, inflammatory and degenerative problems. They help to protect against diminishing brain function and lowered immunity. So dandelion is a veritable rasana. Rasana, for the uninitiated into the Ayurvedic world, means rejuvenative. Many of the dandelion's benefits are related to the bitters. So that's why it's really, and apparently, you know, they say it's important to taste the bitters. I'm not quite sure whether you really have to taste them in the mouth or whether there are receptors throughout the digestive tract that can experience the bitter. But anyway, the sesquiterpenes and the phenolic compounds have antioxidants and anti-inflammatory activities. One of the most abundant constituents in the roots, the flowers, and the leaves is the polyphenol chicory acid, which also has anti-diabetic and potential anti-cancer actions. So, you know, this apparent weed is potentially an anti-cancer remedy. It's amazing and full of antioxidants. It's quite incredible. So an excellent rasana and cleanser with its rakta shodhana effects. It means cleansing. It is used for high pitta and excess kapha, for cleansing the blood and supporting the liver in its detoxifying work. While it increases agni, it also cools excess pachaka pitta and Ranjaka Pitta. That means excess heat in the digestive tract and heat in the liver. It relieves heartburn and acidity and all those problems associated with heat, like peptic ulcers and so on. The antioxidants have a hepatoprotective effect, protecting the liver against damage from free radicals and toxins such as alcohol and drugs, and helping to prevent fatty liver disease that can accompany diabetes. The increased bile flow promoted by its effect on the liver can improve cholesterol and triglyceride metabolism, as well as the metabolism of hormones. So that the dandelion root actually helps to break down hormones. As once they've done their job and they've gone around the body, exerted their effects, then they go to the liver to be broken down. And if they're not broken down efficiently by the liver, then they can go back into the bloodstream, go around again and sort of disturb the feedback mechanisms in the body. So if you want to regulate hormones, even though this doesn't have a direct hormonal effect, by improving the work of the liver, it could be useful in menstrual problems, PMS, menopausal problems. And actually, because it's so nutritious as well, and because of its effect in the gut, it could be useful in the prevention of osteoporosis. The antioxidants also might help prevent and treat diabetes, since oxidative stress is a prime marker of type 2 diabetes. So dandelions can actually stimulate the release of insulin in the pancreatic beta cells, helping to bring down blood sugar, and they also improve glucose absorption in the muscle tissue. So with its medahara, that means regulating fat, and prameha, that means is good for diabetes. It inhibits enzymes that digest carbohydrates, which also help to regulate blood sugar. The chlorogenic acid has the potential to prevent obesity and inflammation and improve insulin secretion and sensitivity. By regulating carbohydrate and fat absorption and regulating their metabolism, dandelion is also really well worth thinking about as an aid to weight loss. That's the root as well as the leaf. The leaf is diuretic, and the bitterness is really a great, it reduces both pitta and kapha, but again, the diuretic effect can be helpful for losing weight. I mean, it might be just losing water. It has a close affinity with Mutravahaschrotas, which is the urinary tract. And, you know, a lot of its names, pisonli, pissing the bed, tell us, and I remember as children that my sisters and I used to chase each other around the garden because we actually thought that if you smelt the flower that you would wet the bed. And so sort of being nasty sisters, we were trying to get each other into trouble by wetting the bed. It's an effective remedy for fluid retention, breast tenderness, cellulite, urinary infections, and prostate problems. So interestingly, and I know people always say this about dandelion, but in case you don't know, the leaves are high in potassium. So when you have a diuretic, one of the problems with orthodox diuretics is that if you increase the elimination of urine, then you can lose a lot of electrolytes with the urine. And one of the problems is that when you put on diuretics, you could then lose too much potassium. Potassium is really important for normal heart function and function of the heart muscle. So what dandelion leaves do is they come ready packed with their own high potassium levels, so that you don't get you can make up for the loss that you might get through the diuresis. A decoction of the whole plant, that is the leaves and the roots and potentially the flowers as well, are useful for dissolving urinary stones and for eliminating uric acid, and so it might be useful for gout. And so it's quite often taken with celery seed as a brew for arthritis and gout. 45%-ish of the root is inulin, a complex carbohydrate, a fructo-oligosaccharide, and prebiotic, which promotes the good bacteria, stimulates peristalsis, and helps clear toxins from the gut. So through this action, then of course, your gut flora are responsible for about 80% of your immunity. So in this way, they can help support the immune system, help suppress abnormal cell growth, normalize blood sugar, and help prevent obesity and osteoporosis. Again, even more things. Dandelion is both antiviral against Hep B and antibacterial. A triterpene called taraxasterol, particularly in the roots, is anti-inflammatory and has antimicrobial activity against staphylococcal infections. And again, reference to its potential anti-cancer properties. Good source of nutrients for maintaining strong bones, contains calcium and vitamin K and the inulin. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, dandelion clears sama pitta. That means high pitta with ama, toxicity, from the rasa and rakta dhatus, from the lymph and the blood. Good for inflammatory skin problems such as boils and eczema, and good for problems associated with an overworked liver, such as a hangover. So dandelion has an affinity with breast tissue, and stanya vahasrotas, which is the flow of breast milk and the flow of fluids through the breast, is used to treat breast congestion, cysts, and mastitis. The root is a galactagogue, promoting the supply of milk from breastfeeding mothers, and dandelion extracts have been used in traditional Native American medicine and traditional Chinese medicine for the treatment of leukemia and breast cancer. On a subtle level, because if you think about everything that works on a physical level is also working at a more subtle level. And dandelion is a really wonderful remedy for high pitta and, of course, kapha. But high pitta people, they might have a tendency to feel irritable, frustrated, get angry easily, and they might keep their emotions to themselves and so on. So at a subtle level, dandelion helps to relieve emotional stagnation and promote expression of repressed emotions such as anger, frustration, envy, resentment, and grief. So if it promotes their expression, so be careful, you might get worse before you get better. But it's just that they can cleanse on an emotional and more subtle level, as well as on a physiological level. So how to use them? Delicious in salads. Actually, they're delicious when they're small in salad. If you leave them for too long, they do get really bitter. And the later that you go on into the summer, they'll get pretty bitter. You can cook them like spinach. You can put them in your spanakopita, and the roots can be ground and roasted and ground. Okay. How are you doing? Still there? Okay.
Right. Got one question, because we're doing questions as we go, Annie, rather than at the end, so we can get more of your PowerPoint and you in. Atma from Amsterdam has said, I'm going to read it out as she's written it. It doesn't quite make sense, but is that inulin that many women with PCOS are recommended? Have you used dandelion to bring PCOS back into balance?
I might. I very often use liver remedies, so I could use dandelion. I could use burdock, which we're going to hopefully have time to talk about in a bit. So to help regulate hormones, even though they don't have a hormonal effect themselves, but they help the liver to break down hormones, then I might use liver remedies. Yeah.
Okay.
But I probably use a lot of, I mean, I always work on the gut. I use things to clear armor from the gut, and I use prebiotics quite a lot. So it might be dandelion root, it might be bergamot, it might be chicory, it might be other things, it might be garlic. Depends on the patient. So I could.
Okay. Somebody else has said, before I lose it, does it help the thyroid?
I don't use it for the thyroid. It might have some properties that I don't know about, but it's not a remedy that I use for the thyroid.
Okay. So somebody says, Sanji says, can dandelion be good for the winter itch skin?
The winter itch skin. Well, if you've got an itchy skin, you have to think about what's itching it. I mean, it can be that if you've got a sluggish liver, you can get an itchy skin. but you also might have an allergy to something which will give you an itchy skin, or you might have scabies. It depends what's causing your itchy skin. But it's a depurative, it's a skin remedy. It's used for clearing toxins from the outer pathway, bringing them to the gut to clear them out. So the outer pathway is the skin. So it's used for skin problems, but I can't necessarily promise that it's going to be good for the itch, the winter itch, or the after winter itch.
Do you lose the benefits of the herb leaves if you cook them, or are they best raw? That's from men.
Things like vitamin A and vitamin C and folic acid and so on are not that stable. They'll go quite quickly when you cook them. So if you're going to cook them, do that, like spinach, you cook it really quickly. You wouldn't necessarily cook it for hours. Just stir fry it, let it wilt a bit, and then serve it.
Okay.
And I think that depends on the state of your digestion as well. If your digestion is good, you can handle raw vegetables. If your digestion is not so good, stir fry it with a bit of garlic or cumin or coriander or something like that, and make it more digestible.
Okay, one more, and then we'll go on to the next herb with you. For eczema in a child, would dandelion help topically, as I don't think he would eat it?
You could use it topically. You can make a wash of dandelion, but you still need to treat from inside.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the thing about dandelion is that actually, if you get the leaves when they're really young, and the flower petals and so on, you can sprinkle flower petals. Actually, especially for children, they love flower petals, and they'll eat them just because, distract them, tell them a story at the same time. But also the leaves, if you chop them up and you just put them small in your salads or your food, they probably wouldn't notice it. Get some baked sweet roasted vegetables and chop them up small with some parsley or something. There are all sorts of ways of hiding these slightly bitter things, but I would give them when they're young. I wouldn't wait until they get really bitter.
Two that seem to go together, so I'll ask them. Have you used dandelion flowers externally in an ointment? And then we've got, can you make a paste from it? That's my dog, sorry, from it for the skin.
I think you could. I don't, but I don't see why you couldn't. Yeah, and there are probably all sorts of recipes for dandelion flower paste that I don't know about. It's not a herb that I use necessarily externally, but you could. But I think if you're going to treat things externally, like skin problems, you also need to treat internally as well.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so do you want to go on to your next chosen one? We're at the hour point now, Annie, just over, just so that you know, okay?
Okay. We'll see how far we get. This one is a shorter one, not quite so much to say about cleavers. So has anybody got their cleavers with them? So what does it look like? What does it remind you of? They were stuck to my dog. Somebody said a spine, lymph system.
Spine, lymph system, bamboo, pea plant. Yep.
Does anybody know this plant well and know what it looks like in late summer? This is in its infancy. As it gets older, it's going to produce these very sweet little star-shaped white flowers. And then after that, it's going to have, it gets white flowers. And then after that, it gets little round seeds. Yep. And that, so when your dog or you brush against it now, it sticks to you. It's called sticky willy. It sticks to you. But in the late summer, the little seeds stick to you, and you can get them all over your clothes. But actually, when they're on the plant, they make the plant look like, because actually it's supposed to look, according to the doctrine of signatures, it's supposed to look like a lymphatic system. And then, of course, when you've got the seeds in the late summer, and you imagine this all covered in sort of little tiny dots, hi VJ, it'll look like the lymphatic system with the lymph nodes. So, you know, we're being given clues by what the plants look like, what they could be used for. So what about the smell? Anything particularly? Fresh and clean.
Yeah, it does smell fresh and it smells green. I know that sounds silly, but it does smell green. Earthy, grass-like, someone's put.
Yes. This is a kind of bed straw. And bed straw, because it was a bed straw. It was a straw made for making beds that you lay in. So the fact that somebody said musty, but actually the fact that it's earthy and kind of, you know, clean smelling, that's great, because if you're going to lie on it, you want your bed to feel clean. So when you dry it, it does get a smell a bit like new mown hay. It's a sort of neutral, it's not particularly aromatic at all, but it's quite a nice earthy smell. So if you're going back to nature and you want a bed, you want to make yourself a bed, you'd have to have a lot, but there you are. But it grows in profusion everywhere. So it smells earthy. Let's taste it. What do you think?
Sweet, sweet, people are putting.
Mm.
Sweet and a little sour.
Bitter.
I'm getting a more bitter, maybe astringent even. It's quite, yeah, somebody else has put astringent, a little heat.
Mm.
Bitter, astringent.
Mm. Well, you see how subjective this organoleptics game is.
Yeah.
So you can get a sense of it, but we all have a slightly different experience of it. So my first experience with this lot, and again, it depends where it was growing, whether it was in the shade, in the sun, and so on. But actually, my first experience today was that it was really quite bitter. Mm. But normally, my first experience would be that it was more sweet and slightly astringent. So it's bitter and astringent. If it's bitter and astringent, what do we immediately know about what it does in the body?
Katie's put stop secretions.
If it's astringent, yeah, it cleanses because it's bitter. Pitta alleviating because it's bitter and astringent. Yeah.
Yeah. Cleanse and good for the liver. Reduces pitta, clears fluid.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It does.
Stimulates digestion and tones.
It does a bit. I mean, it's not as bitter as dandelion, is it? No. And you wait till we get to burdock if we get that far. So we can deduct that it's cooling, it's cleansing, it reduces pitta, it probably reduces kapha because it's clearing. Okay, let's see what we've got in the PowerPoint. Light and dry, astringent and bitter. Actually, I think the post-digestive is pungent, but actually I would say that you could add to the astringent and bitter. I definitely think you could add sweet. And actually, as it gets older through the season, it gets more sweet as well. Reduces pitta and kapha, increases vata, but only if you had masses of it. Has an affinity with rakta, blood, fat tissue. So the constituents, the tannins are the thing that give it the astringent taste, and that's what makes your mouth dry. And that's the thing, it's the tannins that actually stop the secretion, so they dry up the mouth. They can be used for drying up, excess phlegm, bleeding, and so on. The asperulose side is the same thing that occurs in other bed straws, including sweet woodruff. And that's the thing that actually makes it have that nice kind of newly mown hay smell that is so nice for strewing. The polyphenolic acids are antioxidant and antimicrobial. A wonderful spring cleansing remedy. Clears toxins through several pathways at the same time. It supports the lymphatic system, it's a diuretic, and it's a mild laxative. And because it's bitter, it works gently on the liver as well. So it's diuretic, it's hypotensive, brings down blood pressure. Lymphatic, it's a really good lymphatic stimulant. Immunostimulant, because of course the lymphatics are so tied up with your immunity. Alterative means blood cleansing. Anti-inflammatory, astringent. Anti-neoplastic, so anti-cancer. Febrifuge, brings down fevers. Aperient, mild laxative. Bitter tonic. Hepatic and cholagod, good for the liver and gallbladder. Diaphoretic, encourages sweating. And vulnerary means that it's healing to the skin. This is a really great remedy to support the work, the lymphatic work for the immune system. It works as an anti-inflammatory and a detoxifying remedy. Can activate and normalize impaired immune functioning by its impact on lymphocytes and macrophages. So any problem that you have with the lymphatic system, this is probably one of the first ones that you might think of. And that's why I wanted you to remember that it actually looks a bit like a lymphatic system. It's used for swollen lymph glands, lymphatic congestion, swollen breast, glandular fever, post-viral fatigue, and tonsillitis. But also would be really good for skin problems. So for all the lymphatics, if you think about where we've got lymphatics in the system, we've got the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, the GALT in the gut. Then we've got skin-associated lymphoid tissue, SALT in the skin. Then we've got the glymphatics, which are the lymphatics in the brain. So Cleavers can work on all of these at the same time. It has antimicrobial, antioxidant, and anti-cancer actions with potential for treating cancer of the skin, lymphatic system, and breasts. And people have generally taken sort of large amounts of it and used and made a juice from it, from the fresh plant. In tincture, it's been found to be active against bacteria, including Staphylococcus, Pseudomonas, and Bacillus subtilis, and has an anti-fungal activity as well. It's a really good gut herb in that sense. So it's, and by treating the lymphatic system, so the microbiome, the friendly bacteria in the gut, are housed in the GALT, the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. So it's sort of doing double benefit for the immune system at the same time. So Ayurvedic actions, good remedy for arthritis and gout, helps to break down urinary stones and calculi, and that's because it has an affinity for the urinary system. Reduces swollen glands and lumps, good for skin problems, the skin-associated lymphoid tissue, helps to regulate fat metabolism, good for losing weight. In Western herbal medicine, it's got a reputation for being one of the best remedies with fennel for reducing weight. So it helps to regulate metabolism. Diuretic, enhances the circulation and purifies the blood. It clears ama, pitta, and kapha. Oops, where did we go? Oh. No, I think I lost. Right. I don't know why. Oh yes, sorry about that. It wants to jump. Okay, it clears ama, pitta, and kapha from the rasa and rakta dhatus. So ama, toxicity, pitta, and kapha from rasa, which is the lymph and the circulatory systems. As a diuretic, it's working with the cleansing work of the lymphatic system and really good for chronic skin problems like psoriasis, acne, acne rosacea, eczema, boils, abscesses, as well as a good anti-inflammatory for gout and arthritis. When you take herbs that are diuretic, very often when you want to have a diuretic effect, you take them in an infusion, but you wait until it's lukewarm to cool. When you want it to have a diaphoretic effect, as in increase sweating and bring the circulation to the surface and release heat, then you take it as a hot tea. So taken in a hot tea, it has a diaphoretic effect, bringing blood to the surface and causing sweating, helping to reduce fevers and cleansing toxins via the skin. Because actually, you know, sweating is by some people a rather underused pathway of elimination. If you're not taking regular exercise that actually makes you sweat, then we can neglect that pathway of elimination for clearing out toxins from the system. So actually getting a good sweat up, or actually stimulating sweating by diaphoretic herbs. So lots of the cleansing herbs are, when you take them cool, they're diuretic, like the dandelion, but when you take them hot, they're diaphoretic. When you take things as a diaphoretic in a hot tea, it can be useful when children are ill and you don't quite know what they've got, but if you give them something to bring out a rash, to actually bring out sweating or reduce the fever, if they're going to get a rash, like in measles or chickenpox or whatever, it'll bring out the rash more quickly. Once the rash is out, the fever then tends to go down and they feel a lot better. So it's used for bringing out the rash in eruptive infections. Burdock is as well, so is mint. So taken lukewarm to cool has an affinity with Mutravaharotas, that's the urinary system, and cleanses toxins. That way used for kidney gravel, urinary infection, cystitis, irritable bladder, prostate problems, and fluid retention. Through its diuretic action, it helps to reduce blood pressure and might be helpful for losing weight. So one of the constituents may also have a hypertensive, so the asperula side might also be blood pressure lowering. That's the tea. It actually looks quite nice, doesn't it? Its slightly bitter taste comes from constituents including iridoid glycosides and sesquiterpenes, which regulate the liver, Ranjika pitta, promote liver function, stimulate the flow of bile, and improve digestion, especially of fats. And it also has a mild laxative action. The antioxidants, including the flavonoids and the polyphenols, have a hepatoprotective effect, protecting the liver from damage caused by infections, toxins, drugs, and alcohol. It may be helpful in hepatitis. These herbs that are hepatoprotective are amazing. And unfortunately, one of the ways that they know about the antioxidant effect of all sorts of plants is through animal studies. And they found that, you know, if they gave drugs that could be liver toxic, or other substances that could be liver toxic, that actually when they use these herbs that are hepatoprotective, particularly things like milk thistle, rosemary, that they protect the liver from damage caused by all sorts of things. And so quite amazing, this sticky little plant is a hepatoprotective herb, amazing. So that's it. Right, I know we've got nettles to do, but I thought that actually I would skip nettles because we've only got a few minutes left, and I would go right on to violet if I can find it. Do you mind if I do that?
No, that's fine. Just one person has put how to make a juice.
Well, you get a juicer and you stuff as much fresh cleavers in the juicer as you can, and it'll come out as a juice, just like you would juice your carrots or your, you know, cabbage or your chard or kale or whatever.
Yeah, it's quite easy to juice that one, even if you put it in a pestle and mortar and bash the hell out of it.
Yeah, a smoothie is not the same.
No.
A smoothie, you've got all the different things. I mean, you can still do a smoothie. It's going to be a little bit rough because, you know, it's quite fibrous. Whereas with the juice, you just get the juice out. You don't get all the fiber. Some people say they really like to have the everything in a smoothie because you don't lose anything, and that, you know, some of the fiber might be quite nice, but it depends on your taste. But I think you're going to get much more concentrated amounts if you take a juice. And I think it was for the juice was used for the treatment of cancer because they wanted to get concentrated amounts.
Somebody else has put, I've heard that you shouldn't heat and it should be a cold infusion, I suppose. I make tea. I'm sitting here drinking it at the moment, out of it all the time. It's one of my favorite ones.
It depends what you want it for. If you want it to be really soothing and cooling, then you might use a cold infusion. So you infuse it in cold water. But what that does is much more bring out the mucilage, the more sort of sweet and soothing side of it. but actually to make it as a tea with hot water is also fine. And you'd want to make a hot tea, obviously, if you wanted it to be a diaphoretic.
Yeah, I drink mine cold all the time. Can we consume too much of these herbs when they are fresh?
Well, I think that everything in moderation. I think that it would be very hard to, I've never met anybody that's taken too much wild garlic or too much dandelion or too much cleavers. But of course you could. And so you should look on, look at, you can look in Dispensing with Tradition, and you can look in other herb books to check on any drugs that you might be taking, herb-drug interactions, dosages, and so on. So I'm not going to recommend that you can just have unlimited amounts of any of these herbs, but actually cleavers, and dandelions, they're a bit like foods. It's a hard dividing line, isn't it? This isn't like suggesting that you're taking lily of the valley, which is full of cardiac glycosides and the dosage is very restricted. You've got a much broader dosage. But I'd probably say that if you were going to drink a tea of cleavers, just do the standard dose, which is, you take an ounce or like 25 grams of the herb to about a pint of water, infuse it, leave it for 10 minutes. If you want it to be cool, because you want to use it for the urinary system, just let it cool. And drink. It depends what you had it for. If you wanted to do it as a cleanser, you could do a cupful 3 times a day. If you had an acute urinary infection, or you had an acute infection, or you had tonsillitis or something, you might want to be taking it every couple of hours. So it depends whether it's an acute problem or a chronic problem. Generally speaking, I would say a cupful of the tea 3 times a day in chronic problems and every couple of hours in acute problems. But when it comes to making things in food, dandelion leaves, treat them like spinach leaves. You're not going to have spinach leaves every day 3 times a day. You're going to have them occasionally with your frittata. You're not going to have them every day. Treat them like a normal food.
Okay. So do you want to do violet then? And then
let's quickly do violet, because I know you're going to have to go. So I'm going to flick through some of these. So it's so sweet violet. And I thought that I wanted to end with a really beautiful plant. So Viola. Odorata, because it smells really sweet. The leaf and the flower are used. The taste, sweet, bitter, and slightly salty. It's cooling. It regulates all 3 doshas, but if you had a lot, then maybe it would increase kapha, but I don't really think so. These are the constituents. So it's interesting. You can see mucilage, which makes it really soothing. You can see the coumarins and the phenolics, and the saponins and the flavonoids, which are all antioxidant. You can see it's got calcium and magnesium that are really good for the nervous system. The tannins that make it astringent, the volatile oils that give it its amazing smell. It's got alkaloids, but also the glycosides. If you look at the glycosides, gultherin, salicylic acid, and methyl
we
ester.
can't see the PowerPoint, so people are going, we can't see the PowerPoint, we can't see it. Have you got it up?
Oh, yes. Hang on a minute.
Massive, we can't see it, please share, coming down the side.
Oh, okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's a good thing you did. Right,
Yeah,
can you see that?
Yeah, now, yeah, thanks.
Okay. So its actions, alterative, that means blood cleansing, antiseptic, antifungal, astringent because of the tannins, anti-inflammatory, well, it's got salicylates in it, it's like a herbal aspirin. Nervine, it's a wonderful remedy for the heart and the mind. Aperient means mild laxative, analgesic. Petrol and expectorant, it's a really good herb for coughs and chest infections. Bronchodilator, great herb for asthma. Diaphoretic, brings down fevers and makes you sweat. Vasodilatory, dilates the arteries. Hypertensive, brings down blood pressure. Antioxidant, febrifuge, lipids, lowers lipids. Been valued as a medicine at least since the time of the ancient Greeks, and they were used to moderate anger, to procure sleep, and to comfort and strengthen the heart. And for Shakespeare, violet was a symbol of humility and constantly in love. And in medieval times, violet symbolized Christ's humility. So Ayurvedic actions benefits the eyes, resolves urinary stones, reduces tumors and swollen glands, brings down fevers, alleviates skin condition, brain tonic and nervine, purifies the blood, clears congestion from the head and relieves pain. With an affinity for the heart and the mind, violet reduces stress and anxiety, lifts the spirits, cools anger, reduces grief and heartbreak, and improves memory. Well, that's quite a reputation, isn't it? Ideal remedy to cool the fire of excess sadhaka pitta. That's the pitta in the heart and the mind that gives rise to feeling angry or impatient or frustrated or being a perfectionist, feelings of low self-worth and depression. This may be explained from a scientific point of view by the antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects of the constituents, including phenols and flavonoids, which improve brain function and protect from neurodegeneration that's related to free radical damage. Sweet violets, they say, help us to be sweet and kind and loving to ourselves. They have analgesic and anti-inflammatory effects, help to relieve stress-related symptoms such as headaches, colic, and insomnia. They have antispasmodic and nervine effects used for epilepsy, dizziness, and exhaustion. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, reduces excess pitta, we said that, particularly pitta in the heart and the mind, but pitta and vata in pranavahashrotas, that means the chest. The combination of the soothing mucilage and the saponins that have an expectorant effect make it a soothing expectorant for harsh, irritating coughs and chest infections because it's antimicrobial. It's good for bronchitis, chronic bronchitis, whooping cough, tonsillitis, and asthma. Anti-inflammatory for sore throats, tonsillitis, laryngitis, and anti-inflammatory and bronchodilatory for asthma and bronchitis. It's traditionally been made into a really lovely syrup, but you'd have to make an awful lot of violets to make enough syrup to give as a children's cough syrup for dry coughs. And again, to make into a hot fusion to bring down fevers. But still, if you've got a lot in your garden, then why not? It's popular in Iranian, Greco-Arab, Ayurvedic, and Unani for treating whooping cough, headaches, migraine, insomnia, colds, and sore throats in children and adults alike. It's antimicrobial that could be attributed to the cyclotides that have potent activity against bacteria, as you can see. So violet is a good remedy for bronchitis, cystitis, and tonsillitis. Really soothing because it's full of mucilage, soothing and cooling remedy for the gut, cools pitta type heat and inflammation. And because it's mildly laxative, it's good for vata children's constipation or adults. Good remedy for fungal infections and for Pseudomonas, an opportunistic antibiotic resistant pathogen that causes infections in hospitalized patients, such as those with extensive burn sepsis. So actually, I just put that because I wanted you to know how incredibly powerful this is. It's such a sweet herb, you know, that it actually likes the shade, and the flowers kind of hide behind the leaves, and it's been called a symbol of modesty and shyness. But actually, this symbol of modesty and shyness with its tiny little flowers and leaves is actually an amazing remedy. In Chinese medicine, violet flowers, leaves, and root are used together for helping to resolve hot swelling, cysts, and tumors. They're used in the treatment of cancer, breast, lung, digestive tract, skin, throat, and tongue. The cooling and anti-inflammatory effect is related to the glycosides that we said earlier, the salicylates that make it like a sort of herbal aspirin, which are obviously useful for everything that you would use an aspirin for, including arthritis and gout. And it's also, because it clears the skin and cleanses the blood, it's good for inflammatory skin problems such as boils and abscesses. With its antioxidant, vasodilatory, and diuretic activities, it's good for reducing blood pressure, lowering cholesterol, and plays a role in preventing cardiovascular disease. Soothing to the urinary tract, good for cystitis, vaginal infections such as trichomonas, urethritis, and urinary tract infections. So externally, you can make, if you had enough of the flowers, you could actually make a poultice that people used to do this when they could get hold of more violets, and applied it to heal cracked nipples and inflammatory skin conditions, and used it for fungal infections and thrush. And you could but it would be quite a nice remedy to use to bathe sore eyes. A compress is used for boils, conjunctivitis, breast cysts, tumors, hemorrhoids, and applied to the back of the neck to ease headaches. Tea can be used as a gargle, and combined with vinegar, the roots, so you can use the roots as well, were traditionally used to make a liniment for arthritis and gout. And that is the end, but we missed out a few in the middle.
For Annie, which says there is a surge in antibiotic-resistant E. coli UTI recently. Any suggestion, Annie, if you can quickly throw a little bit of light on that?
What did he say that about antibiotic resistance and the UTIs? Yeah, I mean, I agree. But there are wonderful herbs for UTIs. What about his favorite Ayurvedic herb, Gokshura?
Mm-hmm.
So I use a herb a lot called Uva ursi, but you could use dandelion, you can use cleavers, but I would use it with something that's really quite a powerful antimicrobial for the urinary tract. So I use Uva ursi. I actually put Uva ursi with Gokshura together.
Okay, we got one more here that you're going to have to ask, seeing as where we are. Any suggestions for COVID-19?
Andrographis.
Yeah.
Andrographis, you know, interestingly, in Thailand, the Thai government suggested that everybody in Thailand took Andrographis because it's such an amazing antiviral. It's a fantastic anti-flu remedy. It's brilliant. And then in other parts of the world, you know, Artemisia annua, which is a Chinese herb, Qinghao, but it's an anti-malarial that's really effective, but it's also an antiviral. So I would say there are masses of antivirals. When I had my daughter in the house who had COVID at the first lockdown, I ate so much wild garlic because I had it in the woods near me and I had it in the garden that I don't think anybody would have wanted to come in the house. But I took Sudarshan, I took vitamin C and magnesium and zinc and masses of wild garlic. And I thought that I would have antibodies to COVID because I was living with my daughter when she had COVID. And so I thought in December, I thought I'd do an antibody test. Sure enough, she had antibodies. I didn't even have any antibodies and I was living right with her. So who knows, is that the wild garlic, or is it just my amazing immune system? Or is it that it was, there's just no accounting for why some people get COVID and some people don't, when you can have people in the same household and some get it and some don't.
Yes.
So I don't know, they're amazing. I mean, the herbal world is full of antiviral herbs. And, I know we're not allowed to say that, but I'm saying it.
Okay, VJ's asked again, any suggestion for post-vaccination tinnitus?
Oh, have you tried ginkgo?
I don't know where he's gone to.
And actually, this is used for tinnitus.
What is it? It's
ground ivy. But I think because it's the vaccine, who knows? I mean, I've been using a lot of antiviral and immune enhancing herbs for people having the vaccine to help prevent side effects. So I'm just sort of generally using immune boosting herbs. So I've got like massive, all the best antiviral in one bottle. I call it Immune Boost.
Okay, well, you heard it there. Go to Annie, get her immune boost. And,
yeah, roll up.
Annie, thank you very much for giving up your time in this evening. It was wonderful. I know everybody's enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody, for joining this Ayurvedic Professionals webinar. And we hope to see you soon.